Let us scrutinize Lady Lazarus as a confessional poem. To confess means to admit, especially admit wrongdoing. To confess means to acknowledge something reluctantly because it is painful or embarrassing. Confession is the Catholic ritual in which the sinner admits his sins to a priest, does the penance suggested by the priest, and is granted absolution. There is no doubt that Sylvia Plath is one of the most remarkable confessional poets the world has ever seen, and that Lady Lazarus is the apogee of Anglo American confessional poetry. This is a man's world. There cannot be any doubt about it, despite all the revolutions that have taken place. This is a man's world, and women are living in a man's world. They are constantly reminded of their inferiority, of their incapacity, of their inability. But there is one thing in which they excel, indisputably excel. There is one thing in which they indisputably do better than men, and that is confessional poetry. Women certainly make much better confessional poets than men, as exemplified by Sylvia Plath. And a woman is more willing than a man to take her reader into complete confidence. Emotions like hesitation, reluctance, embarrassment are totally alien to the confessional poet. The confessional poet, again as exemplified by Sylvia Plath, wears her heart on her sleeve, to borrow a line from, to borrow an idiom from William Shakespeare. I think it's William Shakespeare's Othello. The confessional poet finds fulfillment in sharing her innermost thoughts, innermost emotions, innermost secrets with her reader. Why do we say that Lady Lazarus is the acme of Anglo American confessional poetry? For a number of reasons. The first of these is that the principal theme of Lady Lazarus is death. Not just death, but self caused death, suicide. Discussion of a subject like death, a subject like suicide, was highly embarrassing for poets until poets like Sylvia Plath arrived. Here is a poet happily discussing her failed suicide and trying to work out again very happily the consequences of that botched attempt. Similarly, the discussion of the decay of the flesh, of the human flesh, was taboo, but it is not taboo for Sylvia Plath. All of us have to die, all of us have to rot, at least in body. But we find it very painful, very embarrassing to speak of the rotting of our bodies. In the poem, the poet alludes to the decay of human flesh without any sense of embarrassment, without any sense of reluctance, without any sense of hesitation. The relationship between the doctor and the patient is certainly not a relationship to be ruthlessly exposed. But that precisely is what Sylvia Plath does in Lady Lazarus. The complex relationship between the doctor and the speaker is given an exposure without any restraint in the poem. Lady Lazarus displays a keen awareness of the utter callousness of the world towards suffering women. The poet makes it clear that she knows that what is tragedy for her, what is trauma for her, is only entertainment for the world. An extremely traumatic experience is converted into a spectacle of entertainment. Even though the poet knows this, she is willing to throw light, bright light, on her experience as a survivor of suicide, her experience as a victim of a failed suicide attempt, and as a patient in the hospital. Thus, it can be said that in a way, the spectacle of entertainment is conducted once again, this time within the confines of the text of the poem. Anyone who subjects Lady Lazarus to a close reading will realize that the mental state of its author is not exactly normal. In real life, Sylvia Plath was repeatedly under psychiatric treatment. She frequently required medical help, psychological support, and the same were to some extent given by the outer world. It is clear from the recent biographies of Sylvia Plath that she suffered from clinical depression and type 2 bipolar disorder. In this poem, there are enough hints to make us realize that the author of the poem is mentally disturbed. Mental illness in general was taboo for poets until the rise of confessional poetry. In Lady Lazarus, the poet happily shares with her readers the suggestions that she was not mentally stable, that she was not psychologically normal. While teaching Lady Lazarus, students frequently point out that the poem has more than its share of contradictions. It is true, because a confessional poet is never afraid of contradicting herself. She lives in the moment. Sylvia Plath's Lady Lazarus has more than its share of contradictions. But the presence of these contradictions only strengthen the confessional nature of the poem. The technical aspects of the poem, such as the three-line stanzas, such as the short lines, such as the fast-moving pace of the poem, such as the conversational tone of the poem, such as the use of everyday diction in the poem, all strengthen the element of confessional poetry, all support the element of confessional poetry present in the poem. Why does a confessional poet write a confessional poem? Is he not or is she not ashamed to write a confessional poem? The answer to this question lies in the construction poetry as therapy. The confessional poet writes a confessional poem for one thing because she cannot but write it, and for another because it acts as an absolution, it acts as a therapy, as a treatment. This is very much visible in the text of Lady Lazarus. The poem begins in a very somber mood. The poem passes through areas of extreme bitterness, areas of intense confessionalism, areas of contradictions that cannot be resolved, and finally reaches a point of extreme exuberance. The poem is able to move from a very somber mood to a mood of exuberance because the poet has used confessional poetry as therapy. Her problems, her contradictions, her embarrassments, her apprehensions are all taken care of by the therapy. And what is the therapy? Nothing but confessional poetry.